A long time ago, in the land of Israel, a war was brewing. On one side stood the army of Israel, led by King Saul. On the other, the mighty Philistines. These two nations had been enemies for years, and now they had gathered for battle. But something strange was happening. Every morning, just as the sun rose over the hills, and every evening, as the sky turned red, a single man stepped forward from the Philistine camp. Not just any man, a giant. His name was Goliath, and he was the tallest, strongest warrior anyone had ever seen. His armor gleamed in the sunlight, and his spear was so big, it looked like it belonged in the hands of a god. His voice was deep, like thunder rolling across the valley. "Israel," he bellowed, "why do you even bother with an army? Send just one man to fight me. If he wins, we will be your slaves. But if I win, you will serve us forever." The Israelites trembled. No one moved. No one spoke. For 40 days this happened. Every morning and every evening, Goliath came out, taunting them, waiting for a challenger. But not a single man was brave enough to fight him. Not even King Saul, the tallest and strongest of Israel's warriors. But far away, in a quiet countryside, there was someone who wasn't afraid. A young shepherd named David. David was the youngest of 8 brothers. While his brothers were soldiers, he spent his days in the fields, taking care of his father's sheep. He had no sword, no armor, just a slingshot, a staff, and a heart full of courage. One day, David's father Jesse called him over. "David," he said, "take this food to your brothers at the battlefield. See how they are doing." David was excited. He had never been to a battle before. He packed up the food and hurried to the camp, eager to see the fight. But when he arrived, he didn't see a battle at all. He saw the Israelite soldiers whispering, hiding behind rocks, their faces filled with fear. And then he heard it. The deep, booming voice of Goliath. "Is there no one brave enough to face me?" the giant roared, laughing. David looked around. No one was stepping forward. He frowned. How could they let this man insult the army of the living God? "Why is no one fighting him?" David asked. A soldier turned to him. "Have you seen him? He's a giant. No one stands a chance." David shook his head. "I've fought lions and bears to protect my sheep. God helped me then, and he will help me now." Word of David's boldness spread quickly. Soon he was standing before King Saul himself. The king looked at him, surprised. You are just a boy. How can you fight Goliath?" David stood tall. "I have fought wild animals with my own hands. God kept me safe then, and he will keep me safe now." King Saul saw the fire in David's eyes and agreed to let him fight. "At least wear my armor," he said. David tried it on, but it was far too big. He could barely move. He shook his head and took it off. "I don't need this. God will protect me." Instead of a sword, David walked down to a small stream and picked up 5 smooth stones. He placed them in his pouch, grabbed his slingshot, and stepped onto the battlefield. Goliath saw him and laughed. "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? Come here, boy, and I will crush you." But David didn't flinch. He took a deep breath and shouted back, "You come against me with a sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty. Today he will give you into my hands." David reached into his pouch, pulled out a stone, and placed it in his slingshot. He swung it around and around, faster and faster. And then he let it fly. The stone whizzed through the air and struck Goliath right in the forehead. The giant's eyes widened. He staggered, and then fell to the ground with a mighty thud. Silence. The mighty warrior, the terrifying giant, was dead. The Israelite soldiers cheered. The Philistines panicked and ran. David had won. With one stone, one slingshot, and unshakable faith, he had defeated the giant. And that young shepherd boy, he would one day become Israel's greatest king, King David. That day, Israel learned an important lesson. It's not about size, strength, or weapons. It's about faith. Because when you trust in God, no giant is too big to defeat. And so, the boy who trusted in God became the man who led a nation.